So let's go back. So let me just make sure that we're all aware of what we're supposed to be doing. You need to create these folders as a subfolder of your lab 3, an about folder, a beverages folder, a CSS folder, an images folder. And the idea of this lesson actually is for us to go and use that CSS to style and we're going to change the color of some fonts, and we're going to change some other sort of features of what we're doing just using the CSS. But this time we're actually using CSS as an external CSS. What that means is the CSS is actually contained in a file that when you create this file, use your editor and save it as a CSS file. Now, what I mean by that is, look, if I go and save as, you can see the types of files. There is a type of file there called CSS. That is different than an HTML file, and it's certainly different than a TXT file or anything like that. You need to save your external CSS file as a CSS file, right? Then the HTML, your browser will be able to identify that as CSS and be able to use it. So that's what we've got. We've got that CSS file. No, I don't want to save that. Sorry. So you've got a CSS file. Now, hopefully these commands, let's go through each of these because you're going to use something like this. Hopefully these commands actually made some sense to you. So what we've got here, we got two parts. We got a selector, all right? And it even says there that it's a selector, all right? So the selector identifies the part of the HTML that you're going to program. And then you've got your actual program command. So the command here is that we're going to change the way that this is displayed. So it's going to be the Arial font. The Arial font is a or a sans serif font, or a font that doesn't have sort of curly bits on the edges of the letters. All right, so that's that one. What this one means, the IMG means the selector is IMG. That means you've got an image tag somewhere. Wherever this CSS is applied, excuse me, sorry for that. Wherever this CSS is applied, we're going to use this little bit of programming, which is we're going to set, doesn't matter what the image is, its width is going to be displayed as 200 pix and its height is going to be displayed as 200 pix. This is a very nice idea for setting our images to all look the same. Or at least we can set them the way we want. So, I mean, I could change this to 100 or whatever, but this is what we're doing. Now, what we're doing here, I hope you've become familiar with this too. We got two selectors together and we separate them with a comma. And what that means is that the program command that's going to be inside these curly braces here is going to apply to both of these selectors. So that means that when this CSS is applied, that wherever there's an H1 and an H2, where this CSS is applied, then the color is going to be specified as blue. Sorry, as gray. Now, the other thing we're going to do is for the H1, we're going to put a border on the bottom, which is going to be, so we're going to underline it basically. We're going to put a bottom underneath the H1 with a nice solid black border to it. Wherever we have a paragraph, so this is the selector for a paragraph, we're going to make the color maroon. But look what we're doing here. We got paragraph dot green T. So the dot, whenever you see a dot, that means it's a class. Okay, whenever you see a dot, that means it's a class. So we've specified some paragraphs as a class green tea. We specified some others as a class raspberry. We specified some others as a class blueberry, and we specified some others as a class or all the same. The type of braces is very important. I think somebody's trying to ask me that question. When we're using the commands here, it must be a brace. We don't use the round brackets or the square brackets. Okay, so it's a curly brace. That is the standard syntax for doing these kind of commands. Don't use any other bracket. Okay, it's got to be a curly brace. So it is really very important that you do that. All right, so what we've got there is we're using a class. So the idea is that If there's no class specified, because you see, remember the way that the CSS works is it's a programming language, and so it works from the top to the bottom. So what's going to happen is that at this point in the program, all of the paragraphs are going to be maroon. But then after that, if there's a class called green tea, then it's going to be green. And if there's a class called raspberry, then it's going to be blue. And if there's a class called blueberry, then it's going to be pink, etc. And so we end up with, and I need to sort of get into the folder so we can see this, I suppose. We end up with this website. So the website is here. I don't see sort of colors there, but no doubt there will be if we move to the different things. So let's go to the Elixir, and you see the colors coming. So there's a green font here, because color works as a font, right? The green color there, that means that this has been specified as a class green tea. And I see a nice blue font here. This has been specified, we've set the class for this paragraph as I think that was blueberry or raspberry, blueberry, or something like that. And likewise here, we get the pink because we set the class that way. And then here, yeah, we got a black one. All right, and then we got some directions, and this is back to the lounge directions. There's not much to this website. The main thing is all happening on this one file here called Elixir. So Elixir must be linked to that CSS. Well, let's see how that happens. How do we link the Elixir to the CSS? Well, let's see if the index is linked to that CSS also. I'm not sure if it is. Yes, it is. So in the index, we've linked it to the CSS. Now, I want to go through this carefully to make sure that you get this right, all right? So we've got the link tag, and the link tag is saying that we're going to link a style sheet. And so these parts, all of this is required, right? We need to say that it's well, I'm not sure about the REL, but definitely the type text/CSS so that this is linking so that it will work as a style sheet. Now the dot, as opposed to dot. None of these are dots. These are all dot, and that's because we're in the index, and the index is in the root folder, right? So basically the dot means starting from where you are, go to the CSS directory, and then the file that you need is called lounge.css. So if we look at our folder, we'll see that starting from where you are, we're editing the index. You would go to the CSS, and the instructions that you want are in the file called lounge.css. So that's what that means. Let's now go to, let's look at a different file now. So I'm going to go to the beverages file because that's the Elixirs one, right? And so I'm going to open that in code, and we'll see that it's slightly different. The link is slightly different. Maybe somebody can tell me why, right? So when I say slightly different, there's no difference there, there's no difference there, but the difference is right here because it's a dot instead of a single dot. And the dot means go to the parent directory, and from there, find the CSS directory, and then the file that you'll want is in that CSS directory. And let's see what that means from here. So from the Elixirs, you can't, there's no subdirectories here, right? So you can't go from the current directory anywhere. You have to go back to the parent directory first. So I'm going to go up. That's the parent directory. This is the parent directory. From the parent directory, then I can navigate to the CSS directory, and that's how I can find that. And so how we tell the HTML to do that is we do it this way. So that means go back to the parent directory, dot. From the parent directory, go to the CSS directory, and that's where you'll find the commands, how you're going to style this page. Now let's have a look at how that is being affected. Remember, we talked about that we're going to use a bunch of classes. Let's see. So we've got our image tags here. We know how the image tags are working, right? Image tag, we say what's the source of the image. And so there must be in the images directory, go to the parent directory, then the image directory, then there's a green tea.jfif. So that's how that's working. But look here, for that image, we've got below it some text in a paragraph. There's the text, and that text in the p tag, we put a class style. And so we've said that this particular text is of a class called green tea, so that when the CSS operates on it, it will recognize the paragraph with the class green tea, and it'll style the color to be green. And so that is what we actually see when we look at how that is being processed. So that was in the Elixir. There's our image, right? So if I go back to Elixirs, here's our image. Image is green tea JFIF. This is green tea JFIF. Notice that all of the images are the same size, 200 wide, 200 down. That's because of this here. We've set all of our images to be 200 wide and 200 high. Okay, and then the color green is coming from the fact that we've said that um, for this bit of text, we put it in a p tag, and we've set the class to be green tea. And so whenever it finds a paragraph with the class green tea, it's going to give it a color of green from the lounge. Now, the only way that would work is if we had implemented that CSS somewhere. And how we've implemented that CSS is by using a link tag in the head to say that the CSS is there, and finding the CSS. So the rest of these things, basically, it's the same idea through here, right? Each of these has its own class to give its own color. Notice that the color is not mentioned in this file anywhere. To find the color, we have to look in the lounge.css. That's where all the colors have been specified. And so the only way that that is going to happen is because we have linked to that CSS. Let's look at those images to sort of verify those. If we go in the folder back to the images directory, there's our images, and these are given to you. You'll find that there's a images dot zip folder, and you can unzip that, and then you'll have these images. But these are indeed the images that are referred to here. There's the green tea, and notice that they're not all the same size, and they're not all the same shape. So how did we get them to be all the same size and the same shape? Okay, so I'm repeating myself now, but we did that with this little bit of programming here in the CSS folder. Now, one of the things that has come up, and I just will mention it here, is this CSS. It is like a programming language, and so we've been using it in a fairly mundane way. Just we're going to make this color here, and we're going to make that background there. But you could actually insert into CSS some kind of nasty code that might act in a virus way. And so as a result of that, people will do what they can to protect their sites. And so one of the things that they'll do is they'll not allow CSS to be loaded up raw. And that's the case of D2L. D2L will not allow you to upload a CSS file, or a file that contains CSS if that file is a flat text file. So what we have to do is we have to compress the file so that D2L will let us allow it up. So that's why it's very important for you to create these folders, put all the files in the folder, and then compress the folder and upload that. Well, now I think I've discussed the entire work that you're supposed to do, but let's look at the instructions and see if that's the case. You're to create some folders. You're to put some files in the folder. So you create the index.html. Then you need to have some links. Okay, so the index.html is pretty simple. It just has these things, right? Bit of words like that, a couple of links in it. So those links are going to be A tags. Then, oops. So let's do this in a little bit more controlled way. Then you've got an elixir.html file, and it's going to have these things in it. And notice that the colors haven't been changed yet. That doesn't happen until you create the lounge.css file, and you link all in, and it actually has the code there for you. You could copy and paste that in, but that's all there. And then you need to link all those things together, and there's some bonus points that you can get. Let's go back to the website itself. So if I go back up here, now you should be able to create these links. So that's, you could do that inside a nav tag. I'm not sure exactly how it was done here, but we can see. If we go to the index, so how they're doing that, there's going to be, well, yes, it's done a nav. So inside a nav tag, it's got some A tags, and there's our menu there. And so so notice this is from the index. From the index, it says from the current directory, go to the beverages folder, and then you're going to find the file that you want. From the current directory, go to the about folder, then you'll find it. Or if you, and this is just pointing back to itself, right? There. Now, if we open up the elixirs example, we also have the navigation there, but the difference in the navigation is that instead of a single dot, it's got a double dot. And for the reason which I explained a minute ago, I hope you got that right. Why? Because if you look at the folder structure, you would see that if you're in the beverages, there's nothing that you can get from the current folder. So a single dot won't work. The only way you can do any navigating is first you have to go back to the parent folder. So going back to the parent folder, then you can start navigating to the other things. So we do a double dot to get back to the parent folder. I think I might have covered sort of everything that I want